Thank you very much, Gillian, and my thank you to the organisers of this terrific global summit. Today, we've heard some incredible testimonies, and I wanted to firstly say thank you to those who were on the panel earlier this afternoon, and to you, Gillian, for the great personal commitment and leadership that you are showing to this initiative. The theme that Ambassador Crocker and I were invited to speak about is, of course, advancing gender equality and nationality laws. I'm mindful that I'm the final speaker before we get to the next session, which is nicely themed as planned action. And I think that's actually what we really want to be hearing a little bit later. So I'll keep my remarks quick so that we can actually hear some terrific stories about reforms that are coming down the track in terms of lifting this growing sense of global consensus that we simply need to be reinforcing, and what this summit is aiming to do. In terms of course, advancing gender equality, one of the panelists earlier today made, I thought, the really important point. It begins with civil society. And in that regard, I just wanted to say the personal testimonies that we heard from Habiba and Gaitiri were absolutely compelling. And I'm sure that neither of you embarked in life expecting that you would become advocates, but circumstances have forced otherwise. And with every great fight that there is against injustice globally, at its heart is this sense of the personal testimony with an irrefutable, and I'd say grain of truth, only it's not a grain, it's a mountain of truth. Why are children and their mothers subject to this condemnation of precariousness and disadvantage that we have heard today? In terms of thinking about where the international lens on this issue, it was heartening indeed to hear from the ambassador of Indonesia, and in terms of the reforms pursued there in 2002 by President Abdurrahman, it was a transformational time for Indonesian society. Equally, we have seen in the last couple of years in the Philippines, reforms that very promisingly are now expediting naturalization for refugees and statelessness people so that they are able to have the documentation that will stop the inherent disadvantage and discrimination that they will otherwise have to experience. It begins with powerful stories being told in each society and within each nation state, and ultimately it will be the parliaments and the executive governments that will need to confront this. But we as a global community can help and rally around that. There's a lot of ways that we can be doing it. And from an Australian perspective, we have placed advancing gender equality as the absolute formational pillar of our $4 billion development program. Every piece of development work we do, whether it's supporting civil society or building a road, we analyze and think it through from a gender perspective, because we have, I think, over the course of generations learned that we need to understand always the implications of the decisions that we make. Convening dialogues and supporting dialogues such as today is a really important part of it. We need to show solidarity with our civil society partners, but we also need to learn from each other. The advocacy that sits behind the I Belong campaign, the work in the Human Rights Council that Ambassador Crocker was mentioning, the core group on the group of friends around this initiative, all of this is around making sure that this issue keeps being pushed to the top of international considerations. At the end of the day, there is so much in this world that our national parliaments and our executive governments cannot control. They cannot by themselves solve some of the massive humanitarian and climate change crises that we're confronting. They cannot by themselves, acting independently, solve so much of the indebtedness and economic development challenges that we see. But they can tackle the inherent intergenerational inequity that these discriminatory laws put in place. Because ultimately, if children cannot access school, they cannot access healthcare, they cannot enter the economy, they cannot enter banking, why would we design a system that creates such intergenerational inequity? This is something which sometimes needs to be said in a different way, in a softer way, but I think the advocacy challenge is there for us all. Thank you for the invitation to speak today, and we look forward to working with you on that.